The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and great to have you with us here today for our little webinar on QUBEdocs automation of your documentation and management of your IBM TM1 and planning analytics. Hopefully that's what you've come for. If that's, you might be on the wrong webinar if that's not the case, but I think you're all on board here, and we're glad to have you with us here today to go over our presentation of this. And as many of you know, this webinar is also kind of an introduction and open to an offer that we have Clear Insight to folks who are on this webinar today to be able to offer you a complimentary health check and documentation of your TM1 and planning analytics solution. And so that will be made available to you later after the webinar. And so we're glad to have you all on board here today. So our agenda for today, if everyone can see my screen, our agenda for today, the first thing I want to do is I'm just going to give you a little update on IBM TM1 and planning analytics. There's a discussion there, and maybe at this point I'll just mention, given the name changes over the years, and as I know with many of our customers as well, sometimes you refer to your solution as just your planning solution. Some of you call it Cognos. Some of you call it TM1. And those who are maybe new into the space are calling it planning analytics. And so whatever you call it, ultimately the solution that we're dealing with and that you have if you're on this webinar is IBM TM1, which is the budgeting, planning, forecasting solution ranked high in the industry by IBM and by industry analysts, and so it's the IBM solution TM1. That solution was, IBM has upgraded it and renamed it to planning analytics. So for any who are wondering why the different terms, it's now called planning analytics, and in the past it was actually under the Cognos brand. And so whatever you're calling it, whether it's Cognos, TM1, or planning analytics, those are all valid names. But just as an FYI, as we move forward and as IBM moves forward, it's now all being consolidated under the new name planning analytics. So I'm going to give you a little quick update there. Then we're going to open it up to talk a little bit about the challenges associated with managing a planning solution. And this is really true for any solution, but we're going to just have a couple points on managing that solution. And then what's involved and how QUBEdocs can help to manage those solutions. A little slide about the health check, and then we'll go into Q&A. And in the managing the QUBEdocs is when we will be doing demos. And so on board with me here today are a number from Clear Insight, but also Scott Felton from QUBEdocs proper. We are partners, have been longtime partners with QUBEdocs, representing the North American space for QUBEdocs. And so we're very thankful to have Scott on board here to do the demo and work through questions as well. So that's our agenda for the webinar today. Many of you are aware and know Clear Insight who are on here, but just to set the record straight, we like to keep things simple, and so we are experts to the Office of Finance. We focus on 4 key panels that we're showing here: budgeting, planning, and forecasting, all that's involved in that. Financial close and regulatory reporting, so helping you with your month-end close, speeding that up. All the elements that are involved in that, including external reporting for some of our customers who are in the U.S. to the SEC, XBRL reporting, and also comes into that your board reporting and helping to make things more efficient in that space. Management and performance reporting, that gets more to business intelligence and business analytics. And so we're very much focused on that and helping you with that in your dashboarding and your scorecarding. And then number 4, profitability and modeling and analysis, and that's where we get into predictive capabilities, advanced analytics, and a number of those areas. And so in all of those, we work strongly with our customers and we partner with our customers to help you, at the end of the day, leverage the business capacity you have and get better outcomes, make things more efficient, give you back time, confidence, and control. And so that's a little bit what we're about, if any of you are on here and didn't know that. So for our IBM update, we just wanted to let you know, because our topic here, of course, today is TM1 and Planning Analytics, is that IBM recently did do an announcement, as they do with all of their products and all their versions, so this isn't anything special for TM1, is as they release versions and new versions come out, older versions eventually go out of support. And so for any that are on TM1 10.2.0, they have announced that support will end for that September of this year. And then the latest version of TM1 that is out into the marketplace, 10.2.2, they've announced that support for that version of TM1 will end September next year for that. And so, you know, there's no, this isn't any kind of scare, it's not a big issue, it's just a, hey, FYI, if you didn't know that, these are going out of support, and basically what that means is if you call IBM after those dates, they're going to say this product's out of support, and they won't be putting new updates out on those versions of the product. So if in any way that's the bad news, the good news is that IBM is encouraging all of their customers to transition from TM1 to Planning Analytics. And so as I mentioned earlier, that really is the new name of TM1. IBM has been investing in TM1 for many years, and the latest resurgence of investment has been to rebrand it, add a number of new features, and it's under the new name Planning Analytics. Some of you who are here who are new to this solution probably purchased and are already on Planning Analytics. Some of you who have been TM1 customers for years, you've been upgrading and taking the new versions and revisions, and you're probably still under the TM1, whether it's 10.2 or 10.2.2. So with Planning Analytics, when you do the transition from TM1, 10 to Planning Analytics, there's a number of new capabilities that are there, including the new IBM Planning Analytics workspace. And so this really becomes a very visually appealing self-service interface capability to all of your plans and your models and your reports and your cubes to your end users so that they can do more self-service. It's a very visually interactive way of getting access to things through the browser. And so that's the new workspace that is part of the new Planning Analytics. In addition, many of you are using Perspectives, the Excel interface where we build your reports, and where you, many of you are using that Excel plugin. That Perspectives was upgraded to something called Cafe a few years ago, and now on Planning Analytics, it's now called Planning Analytics for Excel, short form PAX, if you hear that. So that's just the upgrade of your Excel interface. Just a couple of other new things on the fly hierarchies. There's been a lot of work done to simplify your drilling anywhere and everywhere within your TM1 and Planning Analytics space with on the fly hierarchies. GDPR, as we all know, is down the pipe, and that may or may not be of an issue to you, but different applications have had to be certified for that, and so Planning Analytics is certified for that. So it's part of that. Now, the other good news is there's no charge for you to move to Planning Analytics as it relates to the software. If you're paying your IBM maintenance and support, you are able to download and gain access to the next version, the Planning Analytics version, within your environment, and you can use that. The only thing that there is a charge for from a software perspective is the new workspace interface. And so we've been working with a number of our clients on working out opportunities and special pricing for clients who want to get onto the new workspace interface. And that's the only element that there isn't a cost for, but there is no cost for the software and just getting yourself from TM1 to planning analytics and continuing to operate in your environment. And so, of course, we're very happy for anybody online here. We're happy to give you a demo of planning analytics and the new workspace and talk to you about what might be involved in getting your upgrade through and timing and that sort of thing. So I wanted to give you that first, given that's really what our topic is about here. As we move on to the common challenges of managing environment. And as I look at these that we've written down here, this is true of managing a TM1 planning analytics environment, but it's really true of any software environment you have. And that is if you don't have the resources and the knowledge, and it can lead to missing incomplete information. If you're not fully documented on your system, it's difficult to bring new people on board, new people to understand the environment, whether it's a business user or whether it's an administrator or IT user. Kind of lack of resource can cause other challenges. These applications can get very intricate, very complex, and they manage high elements and high components of your business for finance, budgeting, and planning, and so they can get complex. And so that can lead to anxiety if changes are made, they're not done in a managed environment, and changes create other changes that weren't intended to happen. And independently on your own, just working with TM1, these kind of things can happen. And of course, that then leads also to unmanaged change. These are just a few things that are common challenges in any environment, but also with your TM1 environment. And this is where a solution like QUBEdocs and the health check can help you with this and reduce that anxiety and help lead you along more effectively. So managing the QUBEdocs way, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I'm going to turn it over to Scott shortly because it's really seeing and how this works and how you can manage your planning environment with QUBEdocs is what counts. But ultimately, you're going to see things about automated documentation. You're going to see how very quickly when QUBEdocs is brought into play and we're able to help you with health checks and running things, you can visually see your environment, visually understand how things connect. And that documentation is something that is always up to date. And you know, when a solution is built, documentation is done, but in just a matter of weeks, sometimes changes are done, the documentation isn't updated, and before long, the documentation isn't of any value to anybody. With QUBEdocs, it's always up to date, and you're always looking at the latest things. That then lets you, a key thing is to compare. So down the road, as your environment changes, you want to compare your dev environment to your prod environment, or compare today where there might be a problem all of a sudden versus yesterday there was no problem. QUBEdocs can immediately highlight what has changed, and so you immediately know where it changed, who changed it, what happened, that can allow us to help you either roll back the change, do whatever, and versus really looking for a needle in a haystack sometimes. That leads to the queries and the ability to search your environment, running reports on your environment. Everything that you look at is in context. You're going to see this when Scott shows it, so that it's not just looking at one dimension. It's, well, how does that dimension relate to everything else? And so it really is a great way to gain control and confidence over your environment. And then planning as you move time and migrate, just like we were talking about, as you move from TM1 to planning analytics, there can be a great help in managing that process with the QUBEdocs solution or with the QUBEdocs service that we're able to offer to our customers. So as I mentioned, coming out of this webinar, we are looking forward to doing a complimentary run against your TM1 environment and giving you a model health check. And just as an example, some of the things that you will get out of that health check is because it runs against all the logs in your environment as well, we're able to tell you who's using the system, when are they using the system, who's not using the system, what parts of the system they're being used. And you know, that kind of information can aid in a lot of improvement in user usage and a lot of things, so that you get that out of there. Issue dependency and identification, how different parts of your system interact with each other. change control management we talked about, a training aid, because as new people come on board and you're trying to explain your environment to them, this really simplifies that explanation, and they get a visual look at what your environment is about, and ultimately comes out of that the automated documentation. So these are some of the things we're going to be able to generate for you as a result of this special summer promotion with QUBEdocs, our partner for that. So I don't want to take too much more time than that. I am now going to turn it over to Scott, and Scott's going to open it up, and really a picture is worth 1,000 words, and so my words will end, and Scott, I'm just going to make you presenter right now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ian. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just be sharing my browser. So it looks like I can see it here in my little display panel. All right, so welcome everyone. First things first. QUBEdocs, we're a little software company with kind of a big impact. We work all over the world, and in North America, one of our key partners is Clear Insight. One of the reasons we choose our partners, and we've got a lot to choose from all over the world. There's a lot of folks involved in the IBM analytics space. We really choose our partners based on kind of one criteria. Do they have TM1 experts? Do they have planning analytics experts? These are the people who really understand how the aircraft is built. And we build a product that allows the finance team to communicate with those experts in a way where you always know what's going on in the model, you always know what the latest version of the model is doing, and you have the tools to be able to ask and answer questions. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of walk you through a process. We're going to go down a couple of different paths, and I'll show you some of the most common ways that QUBEdocs is used by both consultants and folks in finance, and also folks in IT. But before I start my demo, I always want to refer everyone to the most important place, which is the website. So if you ever have a question about QUBEdocs in general, you can always go straight to our website. It's QUBEdocs with a Q. You just have to remember it's QUBEdocs with a Q. You can start a trial or a demo, and Ian will be following up with everyone on this webinar with special business partner codes that you make sure you get associated with Clear Insight. You can always find out more related to the product by going to our support site. You'll find the Clear Insight team is represented on our partners tab in our premier partner section. And you can, if at any time you need to reach out to the Clear Insight team, you can certainly do that. You can also schedule a follow-up demo right on our QUBEdocs calendar. And that's something that the Clear Insight team has access to as well. So we do our best to try to make ourselves available to you because documentation, quite honestly, shouldn't stay in the file cabinet or in the closet or locked away in some extremely well-intentioned developer's head, which oftentimes that's where it sits. So, so I'm going to go ahead and commence with the demo, and I'm actually going to use the website just to get right into the application. So we're going to be doing the demo today in QUBEdocs Cloud. So I'll go ahead and click Login, and here you'll notice it's a really straightforward login. I'm going to use my demo account. We pop right into the QUBEdocs Cloud. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is a bunch of tiles. Each one of those tiles represents a connection to one of your TM1 or Planning Analytics servers. We'll be doing most of the work today in QUBEprod, which is our little demo environment. And so I'll go ahead and get started with that right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and view the most recent documentation for QUBEprod. Now what it's doing right now is it's loading up all of the metadata, none of the actual data from your server, but just the metadata from the last or the most recent snapshot. Now we're going to describe the model basically by its objects and its relationships. Okay, so all models are built, based on cubes, dimensions, processes, and chores. Or really, if you want to think of it, the primary and the subordinate data elements, and the ETL, as well as the business logic. Now, the most common place for people to focus when they look at the documentation is they want to see a picture of their model. They want to see the model. And so right from the very beginning, when you install QUBEdocs for the first time, or you run it against your model if you're using the cloud version, the first thing you get to see is automatically you get to see a diagram of what your model looks like. Here you'll notice that our model doesn't have a lot of cubes in it, and it's showing some summary flows. We can go ahead and we can change the view just a little bit here at the top level, so we're really at the top of the model. We can look at the rule and process flows, which changes the color slightly so we can see the difference between process and rule flows. But let's say maybe you have 50 or 100 cubes in your environment and you really want to only see a few cubes. Maybe you really just want to see the balance sheet, the KPI, the PL, maybe PL detail and revenue, but you don't really want to see anything else. So we can just create a diagram with just those cubes, and then you might decide, well, actually, I don't want that PL detail cube in there, and I could refresh it. This is the version of the diagram I want. I can go ahead and save that diagram. And there we have automatically the diagram is right there. So we can always get back to that version of the diagram at any time, no matter how many snapshots we take. For the purposes of our demo, though, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of navigate through the model. So you can see how the model hangs together. You can see where the cubes are and where the flows are flowing. The ETL is flowing into the cubes, and the business logic is flowing between the cubes. If we take just a look at the PL cube itself, the first thing you're going to notice is now the PL cube is at the center of the diagram. You're going to see everything around, or everything that relates to the PL cube. You're going to see data flowing in and out, business logic flowing in and out. You might notice a few other things that are now on this diagram, like you can see the data source that's feeding the PL cube. You can even see a red cube here, which indicates that that cube doesn't actually exist in this model, but there's a reference to it, which means it's an orphaned cube, or it's a missing cube. You'll also notice that we have a few other versions of the diagram. So here I can see just the ETL flows, or the process flows. You can see the rule flows themselves. You can see the rule and the process flows, which is my favorite diagram. And then you can also see the feeder flows. So you really get a lot of information just by clicking into a single cube. Now, if we go back to this rule and process flow, you'll notice that you see a TI process right here, otherwise known as an ETL script, is loading the data into that PL cube. So we can click on that, and now we can see that particular TI process is at the center of our diagram. And you see everything around it. You now start to see some new icons showing up. You can see some metadata updates flowing out of the TI process. You can see that ODBC connection flowing into it from the core financial system. And you really start to get a sense of how this model is hanging together. Now we're at a pretty low level, but we can go a couple of steps even lower. We can even see all the way down to the process script itself. You can see exactly how that ETL is being written. If you're a technical person and you're looking at a script that maybe someone else has written, this is something that the Clear Insight team would do if they're looking at code that maybe another consultant or another developer had written. Maybe somebody used a function, or maybe used it in a way that they're not familiar with. They could go ahead and click on that function and immediately access the syntax for that particular function. So you could see, you go right up to the IBM website for the syntax for that particular function. And they can even get down to the data source query. So what we did was, as I kind of talked my way through it, and I'll just kind of start that whole process again. What we did is we started at the top level. We loaded the PL cube. We looked at the rule and process flows. We clicked into a TI process. We reviewed the process script and the data source query. So we went from the top of the model, the very top of the TM1 model, all the way down to the bottom in 5 clicks. You can do that for every single object in your model, every object and every relationship. And what's more, let's say, for instance, that you were working on your model and what you really needed to do was see everywhere the dimension fin year was used in your model. Here you can see, just by doing a search, we can see every cube rule, where in the cube rules it's used. We can see whether it's being used in feeders, what specific rule line it's being used in. We can get down to the dimension level and process level. So we really have a lot of control and a lot of flexibility. So we not only can see the relationship between every object, but we can also see where every object exists in the environment of your model. Now, there's a few other things that we can kind of look at here when we're walking through the model. So, you know, we start off with this main diagram here, okay? All of this text here against these cubes, for instance, this PL cube, these definitions can be written by you or a business analyst to give you business descriptions for each of the objects. For instance, here we have a list of all the cubes and also all the business descriptions. You can see I put in some placeholder descriptions there. If we click into the dimensions, you can see a list of all your dimensions and how they're used. And you can even start to walk through how these dimensions are loaded. So for instance, here I get a diagram of exactly how the account dimension is loaded. It's being loaded from this particular process. And if I click into that process, I can see exactly how that process relates to the rest of the model. I can also see some other views, for instance, the attributes, the elements, the subsets, and the associated cubes if there are any. We can also see more information related to the processes. Again, you can put a business description against this process. You can see the data sources where they come from and where they go to. We were looking at this process earlier. You can see we have an overview tab here with a lot of metadata on it. Again, we were reviewing some of the diagrams earlier. You can even see information related to the chores, and we have a knowledge base where you can link external documents. You can review the business descriptions for all of your objects, and you can see an entire technical glossary based on the version of TM1 that you're using. So this whole top section that I showed you over here on the left is all documentation. We call this as-built documentation or as-built architectural documentation. It's really the blueprints for your house, right? But you might say, well, that's great. I got blueprints for my house, and that helps if I need to do some remodeling or make some changes or find some wires, right? Or if you need to make some updates to your model, you get ready for your planning season. Documentation as reference material is invaluable in those situations. But what about day to day? Well, one of the most common things that people need to do day to day is understand which dimensions are in which cubes. So we have a cube and a dimension analysis screen. And here you can see all of my cubes are on the left. And I can create a dynamic matrix just by clicking on one of the numbers here. So I clicked on the number 6 next to the KPI cube. And you can see all of the dimensions that are in the KPI cube. And as they relate to all of the other cubes, I can add a few more dimensions to my matrix. And now I have a matrix for maybe I need to write a report or do something along those lines. I have a nice quick reference, and I can export it to an Excel spreadsheet just by clicking the export. Anytime you see a table like this in QUBEdocs, you can always export it to an Excel spreadsheet. We also have information based on users and groups. If we click on the user and group analysis tab, we'll get a quick summary of how many users and how many groups we have in our model, which of them have admin rights, right, and read users, the security kind of based on the objects themselves. The view that I like the best here is either the summary view here that gives me the matrix for the users and the groups, or the user and group profiles. So the user and group profiles is extremely handy for a couple of different use cases. One of them, for instance, is let's say I wanted to set up Claire Smith. And I wanted to set Claire Smith up with the exact same rights as Andrew. I set her all up in TM1. She had all the same rights as Andrew. It appeared that she should be seeing the same reports that Andrew was seeing, but she still wasn't able to see them. One of the things you can do is just add Andrew right to this matrix. And now we can see a side-by-side view of exactly which rights each of those users have. And you can notice right away that we forgot to add her to just one group, which is a pretty easy mistake to make in TM1 because the tools are a little complex sometimes. That's probably the piece that we missed. And we can also do a quick audit by adding different users to the matrix. And then we can get a nice report of who has which rights to which objects. And again, anytime you have a table, you can always export that table to an Excel file. Now, probably what we would consider to be our first killer feature, I don't know, I sometimes think that, you know, possibly search is the real killer feature because I tend to be more of a searcher than a browser. But one of the first killer features that we came out with several years back was that since we're taking snapshots of the model and we know the relationship between every object, we know all the metadata about the object. And if we take another snapshot, we should be able to compare those snapshots. So let's say, for instance, you come in on Monday morning and somebody's having a problem with the KPI reports and they ask the question, are the KPI reports broken? What's going on? Well, maybe this isn't a model that you've worked with or you don't know that much about the KPI reports. The first thing you can ask yourself is, did anything change? Okay. So what we can do is we can take a look at the model this week and last week. This is demo data, so the data is a little old, and do a quick comparison. And the first thing that you notice is you get this kind of overview across the major objects in your model, how much percentage of change exists. So here you can see I got 1% change in the cubes. I can go ahead and look to see which cubes have been added, omitted, or modified, and I will only have a modification in the KPI cube. And here in the KPI cube, I can see that there's been some rule changes. So I can drill that out, and now I can see down at the cube rule level, line by line, exactly which lines have changed and exactly which lines have been removed or added. Here you'll notice that last week they were doing current and prior period, and this week they only seem to be working on prior years. So it's a pretty good likelihood that that's the change that has made it so that the KPI reports aren't working. And you've gotten to root cause analysis just by clicking last week and this week. Now there's a lot of different things that you can see in the change analysis. I just showed you one particular item. But one of the things I like to do in order to demonstrate all of the different areas where we track changes is I compare my QUBEprod model to the SmartCo model, which are completely different models, but we do share a couple of commonly named objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the two of them, and you'll see, oh, you know, there's a ton of change, right? Obviously, because they're completely dissimilar models. You'll notice that they're not 100% changed because both models have QUBEdocs in them, and so a lot of those objects are the same. So I can show you, if I click into the cubes and I load the revenue cube, you can see all of the areas where we track changes in the cube type. So we look at properties, any changes in the descriptions between QUBEprod and SmartCo. You can see obviously lots of changes in the cube rules. Dimensions that are used in the cubes, target cubes, processes that write to the cube, etc. We can even see down at the dimension level, we can really dive deep down into the dimensions. So we share an account dimension. We can, again, look at the properties between the two dimensions, the number of elements, number of levels. We can look at the dimension attributes which have been added or omitted. And we can even get down to the subsets and looking at the modifications in the subsets, the baseline value and the revised value. So you really get a full audit at the documentation level at every single snapshot. Now, on a day-to-day basis, you're probably not going to dig this deep into the documentation. So what's the purpose of having all of this information documented? Because, you know, likely if you had a business analyst in IT or a junior developer and you said, hey, go document my entire model, you wouldn't have them do it every day. You wouldn't have them do it every week, and you certainly wouldn't have them do it down to this level. So what's the purpose of having this much granularity? The purpose is it gives you confidence, and it gives both the business confidence as well as the development team confidence that they can go ahead and build the model, change the model, and modify it and use it for business purposes, always being confident that if anything goes wrong, or if they have to reach back and do an audit against, you know, the impact of a particular change, that they have all the information categorized in a database. It's fully searchable, fully auditable, and fully comparable, so that you can really make sure, if you need it, that you can go back. So that's one of the big features in our product, and one of the areas where I would say it's really probably one of the killer features. Now, we have one more feature here in the documentation itself. We have a section for model statistics. Now, what we do is we capture the basic model statistics. Cube statistics is probably one of the most used statistics because obviously TM1 planning analytics is an in-memory OLAP or cube-based database, multi-dimensional. And so memory for the feeders and memory for fed cells, the way the database operates itself has a lot to do with the cubes, as well as the dimensions. So we have a fair amount of stats just about the cubes and the dimensions and the rest of the model. But this is at the snapshot level. What we're going to show you next, I'm going to skip a few of these features just for purposes of the demo. But what I'm going to show you next is what if, for instance, you wanted to understand how the model was operating, not just between snapshots, but you really wanted to understand how it was operating from day to day at any point during the day. So we've released a new capability in QUBEdocs, and we call it log file analysis. So let me jump over to that really quick. Now, log file analysis, what it does is it allows you to take your TM1 server log and load it up into an analytic solution so that you can start to, in the same way that you look at all of the data and the complexity about your metadata in QUBEdocs, we're going to allow you to look at all of the complexity and all of the verbosity, I would say, in your log files about exactly what is happening at the server level. So let's just take a look at a week of data. And we can see all of the areas where, the messages going between the server and the user, the client and the server, the messages that were just fine. You can see all of the warnings and the errors. So let's say maybe you come in on a Monday morning, you want to take a look at what happened in the previous week. You could go ahead and filter based on error. And maybe you just want to filter specifically and look at the ETL processes and make sure that they were all working well. So you could dive into the TI processes. With a couple of clicks, you can see immediately I get a time series visual of exactly where my errors are occurring and how many of them are occurring and when. I have the detailed line levels of where those errors are. And let's say, for instance, you wanted to dive into this particular error and you wanted to get a little bit more context about it. You can see the error itself, the specific error log that it spawned, the message inside that error log that it spawned, as well as you can click View Surrounding Documents. And when you click View Surrounding Documents, what it allows you to do is it allows you to see that error in context. So you get to see all of the items above it, as well as the items below it. And you can increase the number to create more context. Now there's a few other ways that you can use log file analysis. One of the more interesting ways, in my opinion, to use log file analysis is to just simply, and again, I said I was more of a searcher than a browser. You can just simply ask it a question. So let's see, one of the more common questions is, what dimension changed? So just by typing the word changed in, I can see all of the dimensions that have changed in the last week and who changed them. Here you can see Michael changed one of the dimensions. And I might ask myself, well, what has Michael been doing in the system? I just type in Michael's username and I can see everything that Michael has been doing in the system, when he's been logging in, what he's been doing, what chores he's been running, what dimensions he's been changing. You know, last time I talked to Michael, I think he might have been complaining about the server was very slow to start. So we could just type in start time and see what that brings up. So here, everywhere in the logs for the last week, I can see where the words start and time show up. But I specifically wanted to look at server start time, so I could drill in on server. And here you can see I have a really nicely structured report of exactly when the server restarted, when the session started, how long that session lasted. Here you can see it was 33 seconds, 34 seconds, 40 seconds, 32 seconds. But here I've got one that says 182 seconds. So I could drill into that message again, and I could view the surrounding documents, and I could expand them out, and here we go. Looks like Michael has been logging into the system quite a bit and running some big data saves and some chores. Maybe he's the one that's causing the server to restart, because it seems to be doing just fine in all the other restarts. So you can see how, as we walk through the simple process of asking and answering questions, usually where you really get stuck is you don't have the answer at your fingertips. But when you can ask simple questions and get the answer right away, you can see how the story gets completed. And this is all leads us to root cause analysis. A problem occurs, we start asking and answering some questions, we get to the bottom of what we think it is, we fix the problem, so we do the remediation, and then we do a closed loop feedback where we fix it for the future, and then we start to see our reports being a lot more green and a lot less red. So this is just one of the dashboards in our log file analysis tool that you're looking at here. We have a few other dashboards. So we have one just on process history. This is really kind of a ETL health check in a box. It shows you your longest running process here. We can just sort to see our longest running process. We can compare it to the average runtime. We can see our most run process. We can see the frequency of errors. In this particular model, we use the word load quite a bit in our process names. So I could just search for a common naming convention, and you can see how I've kind of filtered the report just to be focused on my load processes. I can also do the same type of review of all of my TM1 chores, which are really a package of processes. I can also do some user activity reports. So I can look at kind of who's been logging into the system and how often. I can kind of drill into the time period to get a much better idea of exactly what the profile of usage is looking like and where those busy and active days are and where maybe people aren't logging into the system. And I can also do a user audit report. So the user audit report is a report that we use specifically just for doing understanding kind of the user engagement level. Now, this is something that winds up coming up a fair amount with TM1 projects, which is you build this big system for budgeting and planning or whatever the finance function is that you're using TM1 for. And then you start to struggle with, are the people using the system? And if they're not using the system, do they need training? And how do we identify who's using the system and who's not using the system and which people we should offer the training to? And so here, instead of running a big training course and trying to get 50 people into it, you might determine that there's only a couple of people that need training. And so maybe you run a training class just for Sarah and Scott and, you know, Genevieve, and try to drive their user engagement up in the system. You can also see what they've been working on. You can see all of the objects that they've been accessing. Now, the final dashboard in log file analysis, when you have all this data, you kind of have to ask yourself, you know, it's great when it's there, and it's great when you can ask it questions and you have the tools to ask it questions, but how do you manage over time, right? We've built in a key metrics report right on top of the log file analysis tool so that we can set those metrics, those key metrics that you want to monitor over time. How often is your server restarting? What is that engagement looking like with your user community? Do you have a lot of active dimension changes, and where are they really coming from, and how can you review them? And so, as you can see, all of this data is really designed around a couple of basic use cases. So when you combine all of this data with an organization like Clear Insight, who have experts who do this all the time for companies all over the region or the country, you'll start to notice that there are a few things that you want to track and drive up, like user engagement. You want to drive up user engagement. You want to drive down error messages and you know, server restarts and things like that. So that kind of brings us to a good point for us to maybe take a pause, for me to take a breath and see if there's any questions. I see that there's been a few that have been kind of coming in. Do you want to pop in, Ian, and see if we can ask a few questions?
Yeah, great, Scott. So why don't we, I can take control here for a second.
Sure.
And we can do a couple of questions. One question, just while I'm taking control, Scott, that has come up, might be someone who's on here who's like, well, I've never seen or heard this before. And folks are probably thinking, if you're an administrator of TM1, that you've been running blind for a while. And so the question, Scott, is because this is specifically for TM1 and planning analytics, is this supported, endorsed by IBM? It's a curiosity, given I'm going to be running it against my IBM system. And I think their question is how many customers, kind of, not how many, but what's the penetration or usage of QUBEdocs worldwide?
Sure. Yeah, no, those are great questions. So, in fact, we've got folks not only in the IBM consulting communities, as well as the IBM TM1 support community, who use QUBEdocs. They also use some of the base technology that we use underneath to produce this at their cloud level. So the same log file analysis stack that we use, they actually have installed for their internal operations team. So yeah, so we're really quite in line with IBM when it comes down to the real technical nitty-gritty of it. When it comes to the documentation itself, it's kind of I don't know, I guess we call it an interesting story. So if you imagine that you hired a builder to build your house, but then maybe your refrigerator stopped working and your couch broke, and you called up the builder and said, hey, listen, you know, I need you to come and fix these two things. They're broken. He would say, well, hey, listen, I just built the house. I don't put the stuff in it. It's the same concept when it comes to TM1 and the model that's built. When you buy TM1, what you're really buying is a platform, right? And so what IBM is going to do is they're going to support the platform for you. So if you had a question, say something's not working, you call IBM, or your consultant calls IBM and they say, hey, we're getting an error message. We don't know what's happening. What IBM is going to say, rightly so, is they're going to say, well, listen, we built the software. All we can tell you is that it is working as designed or not working as designed. The rest is all the model. So now you have to look at how you built your model, and is your model working correctly? Did you build your model correctly? Is your model creating error messages? Is your model creating conflicts? It's all of those questions, the content questions, that are really difficult for IBM to answer. And so the reason why a tool like QUBEdocs is so important is that it really focuses on keeping track of the work that you do, or keeping track of the work that your consulting team does when it concerns building of the model and the operation of the model. So so that's kind of a little, I guess that's a way to try to differentiate. But they do use our tools quite a bit. The log file analysis tool is very similar to the one that is used internally at IBM, and they sometimes use ours. And the model documentation, they recommend it to their clients all the time.
Thanks, Todd. I think the second part of that question was kind of usage of this. Knowing it, maybe just speak to the global use of it.
Yeah, so there's thousands of customers of planning analytics all over the world. QUBEdocs is installed at 3 of the largest TM1 clients in the world, the first, second, and third largest clients in the world. One of them located in the US here. We're used by global airlines. We just signed up with an airline in Germany. We've got a couple of US airlines that use our product. Insurance companies, financial institutions use it quite a bit because of SOX compliance. And everywhere from beer to auto manufacturing. So yeah, we've got clients all over the world, and we have partners all over the world. So.
All right. Thanks, Scott. I'm not sure if there's any other questions. I don't see any coming up here on those first couple. So maybe I'll just take it back now, and realizing we're getting close to the top of the hour. And so thank you for that, Scott, and walking us through that. Hopefully you folks found that interesting. I do want to say, you know, because I think we've got business level folks on the call, as well as administrators and technical folks on the call. There may have been, for business folks, you know, you got shot with a fire hose of things that you would not get involved in as a business user of TM1, and that QUBEdocs is more for the administration and management of your environment. But for business users, it definitely is helpful for training and understanding the models. But a lot of the nitty-gritty that Scott got into, you know, that's more on the administration level. And so I hope for those of you that are in the administration amounts and areas of TM1 that what you've really seen is with QUBEdocs in play, and or with the information that comes out of QUBEdocs, that you can really exponentially increase your confidence in your control of your environment for yourself as an administrator, but also for the senior executives and senior team in your organization, to let them know that you really have a grasp on your environment and are able to manage it and correct it if anything happened very quickly when you've got QUBEdocs in place there. So just a last slide I think I have here. So on the health check, we're looking forward to running the health check for everybody who is interested, who is on the call with your models, and we're going to be able to run that health check and give you a copy of the documentation and walk you through it, identify any risks that we would see in the health checks. And so we're looking forward to doing that for you at no charge coming out of this. And that's this special promotion working with Scott and the QUBEdocs team. Post the health check, of course, you may be saying, look, this thing is great and I want to use it in my environment. Depending on who you are and the organization size that you are, you may want to work with us. I can provide you costing for either obtaining QUBEdocs on-premise. You can get an on-premise or the cloud environment through which Scott demoed today, and providing you a subscription into that cloud environment so you have full access to it exactly the way Scott showed it to you today with your environment. So we're happy to do that. For some of you, you're smaller organizations. Some of you we work with you very closely and we manage your environments to some degree for you or help you along. We can offer you kind of a clear insight health check service. So rather than you having to buy QUBEdocs, whether cloud or on-premise, that we can work with you and you can work with us here at Clear Insight to subscribe to the health check service, where we will be able to run on a daily basis. We'll automate the running of QUBEdocs against your models. We will archive and store all of those models so that if something happens and you call us and say, look, something's not right, we can immediately do change analysis and error detection and do it on your behalf for you and help you with the management, and as part of that, supplying to you monthly health check reports. So that's just a few of the things that we can offer you as a service without you having to buy QUBEdocs, if that's a better arrangement for you in your environment. And of course, some of the benefits are more efficient issue resolution. You know, we can get to the issue a lot quicker than if we didn't have it. Overall risk management, and then the analytics that go along with it, and the confidence and control that we've talking about. So that's the main coverage there. And so I don't think there's any more questions now. And we really appreciate each one who has joined today. Hope you found it of value. And I look forward to reaching out to you, or you reach out to myself or one of our key consultants that you might be connected with, and we'll arrange that complimentary health check run against your environment. So with that, I think I will close out our webinar, and again, thank you for your time today. Have a great rest of the day to everybody who's here with us. Bye for now.
Thanks, Ian. Bye-bye.